Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. I don't know the rest, but
This is Ugly Sonic's Rescue Rangers, first of all. He's the star of the
he
show.
did come in clutch at the end for sure. I don't know how they got away with that. This movie is just insane.
Oh, man.
Yes, today we will be talking about Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. Not the animated one, but the brand new one from 2022, the live action one. And I have to say, these live action movies with like CGI characters have gotten a lot better in the past, so long. Between Sonic and this, they're almost always terrible, but this movie is absolutely amazing.
It is. I'd have to agree with you. It's almost like a spiritual successor to Roger Rabbit. I really quite enjoyed this one.
I for sure enjoyed this more than Roger Rabbit. I mean,
Really?
there's a certain. Oh, yeah. I'm sure the other one has a better story to it, but I think it's just the shock value of this one because of all the subversions. It's such a good subversion comedy, and especially because it comes out of Disney, it just totally. It's unlike any other Disney movie I've ever seen.
Yeah. Have you seen Roger Rabbit?
I saw it, a few years ago, and they're totally. It's kind of like a spoof of it. That's the best way to describe it. It's not necessarily like a sequel to it, but it's more like making fun of it, and
Yeah.
making fun of all the other Disney properties. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
enjoyed. What?
no, go ahead.
I, I enjoyed it very well. I thought a lot of the references that they made fun of were surprising. Like, you had older version of Peter Pan that had like a beer gut and an aftershave, not aftershave, like a 4 o'clock shadow and stuff. It was wild.
There's just so many obscure references. I didn't even get all of them. There's just too many to count. But it is crazy just how when Disney lets their creators kind of make what they want. I don't know the exact background behind the film or what prompted them to make it, but I have a hard time believing that Disney was 100% on board with the inclusion of a few characters I noticed, or just the film in general.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad they gave them that creative freedom.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk on and on about the cameos. I mean, there's just the amount of cameos is impressive. You have things like Transformers to He-Man, I mean, to Ugly Sonic. I mean, it was nuts.
And the thing is, they didn't get permission for any of them. That was the whole thing. They didn't get permission from Sega. They didn't get permission from anybody. They're all slightly different.
No, you still have to get permission from all these other
You do not.
companies. Yeah, you do.
That's why it's called Ugly Sonic. They changed him enough to where he refuses to say, because they'll get in legal trouble. They
No.
absolutely do not have the rights to all this.
They
Do you
don't
think
have the
Sega would let
rights,
them do
but
that?
they can buy the rights or they can ask for the rights. They don't just
They did not.
They did. That's how movies work, Chase. It's like with Ready Player One. You had Warner Brothers with all these other properties that didn't belong to them, but they still used them. They just asked permission or bought the rights to them to use in that film.
That is different. That was the character.
Yes, but it's making fun of the fact. So, like with Chip and Dale, it's about the years of animation. So you have some characters that are in like the early 40s. You have characters that were the early mocap animation. You have the some of the other characters like Chip and Dale, for instance. You have traditional animation, you have 3D animation, but you still have to ask permission for some of these characters.
I'm sure you do in general. I just
They didn't. They didn't.
I
They
don't.
asked permission. They didn't just say we're going to use your ugly Sonic model. They asked permission. Can we use the old ugly Sonic model? Because it still says Sonic, and I mean it's still like, you know, the trailer version.
Hmm. Man, I'm not finding anything on here, but
Yeah, it's just because that's how like with a lot of movies, that's how it is. Like someone might not have the rights to a Disney film, but if they want to use like say like a reference to Mickey Mouse, they would buy the rights or ask permission to use that reference. Just like Disney did with
I will
this.
hop back in here with a. I will look into this after the podcast, and I will. If there's anything to say, I will say it afterwards. But if there isn't, then nothing will happen. I will edit that in, but I will look into this. Do not let me forget that.
That's just how movies work, dude.
I
I
read.
mean, it's just how it
I know
is.
it's how most movies work, but why would they ever let them do that? I mean, well,
Because it's Disney. When Disney forks over $4 million and says, "Hey, can we use your ugly Sonic model?" You're gonna say, "Yeah."
I don't think they paid. That's the thing. I could be wrong.
But it's also like
They just
it's part of marketing. Like Sonic just had its Sonic the Hedgehog 2 sequel. So part of that was maybe a little marketing, like saying, "Hey, remember when we had old Sonic,
what about all the other characters that they kind of that they kind of like spoofed,
Like
Like there
what?
was some, anime characters, in the background. I promise they didn't let them use those. They totally changed the design. That was the whole point,
No,
was the
well,
bootleg
they
part.
could ask like a few with the anime designs, and it's just like a traditional anime character. It doesn't have to be necessarily like somebody that looks like this person. Maybe you're looking into it a little too much, but it's not that they didn't ask permission. If it's a specific reference to something like they did with He-Man, Transformers, or Ugly Sonic, you're guaranteed that they asked permission or they bought the rights to use that reference or character. I understand what you're saying, but that's just not how the movie business
Oh,
works. Disney asked permission, or the directors did. They said to, Sega or Paramount, whoever was in charge of that, and they said, "Hey, can we use the old ugly Sonic model and just have it be like us making fun of it?"
okay, okay. I think you're right. Now that I'm looking more into it, I'll still add something if there's something to say, but they didn't make it sound so cut and dry when I was reading some other articles. But all right, okay. Now that that's out of the way, isn't it? It's just so incredible that they used Ugly Sonic in the first place. They finally found a use for it, with the teeth and the.
Dude, I want to see a Disney Plus like show or like a Paramount Plus show like about his like FBI journey in this universe. Like that would be absolutely hilarious.
You want to see the Ugly Sonic CSI or whatever it was?
If it's funny, then yeah.
I think the problem with shows like that, right, is that it's funny in premise, but like then you still have to write funny things for them to do.
Yeah.
And haha, he's ugly only goes so far. I think they even did it a little much with the teeth in the movie,
No, they
and that was an
didn't.
hour and a half.
They didn't do it
They
enough.
did it like 3 times. I
It
think
was
they
too
could have
funny.
skipped the second time they did it, but it was very fun.
I just
The
loved it.
character, we got to make a very fine line between like, how a lot of movies are now. They're like, oh, it may not be great, but here's your references. I made a
Hmm.
silly, funny reference from the 80s. I
But the
think this
movie
movie
itself is not that
intentionally,
great.
yeah, but people always praise it. But I think we're getting to a point where it's not flying as good anymore.
Mm-mm.
But I think I'll give this movie a pass because of it did it very well executed as kind of the point of the movie. And it was a funny movie regardless, I feel. Like they totally made fun of it, not just referenced it. Like a lot of movies though tend to try to use it as a crutch, and I'm glad that they didn't just use it like that. I
Yeah.
feel like in general they used it in a very funny way. This is probably the funniest Disney movie by far, right?
Mm, it was funny, but I wouldn't go that far.
I laughed out loud quite a few times during this movie, and I hardly ever laugh out loud at any movie, let alone Disney movies. Like they're not normally
I
meant to be
think
funny.
I
Like name
think they
one
use
funnier
the
one.
references very well. The reason I say this is a specific spiritual successor of Roger Rabbit is because Roger Rabbit was the first major crossover between like all of these characters like Daffy Duck and uh, Mickey Mouse, for instance. And with this, they use their references to their advantage. Like Ugly Sonic, for instance, they kept making fun of him and stuff and saying like, he's got fans, but they still make fun of him. For instance, you have the CGI surgery, quote unquote, where they like take
That was great. They're
yeah,
totally poking fun at like Lion King, all these reboots that they did where they just made everybody super realistic CGI.
and then one of my favorite parts was when they make fun of Seth Rogen and how like many voices he's done over the years of characters. So there's that part when his Viking character falls down, and you got Pumbaa over him, and then you got like Bob and the Mantis from Kung Fu Panda and stuff.
Yeah. It's so yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. There's just so many fun little things to count, and it's really they added so many that it there may be a few that you like don't get or like don't know about, but it's always kind of fun to just kind of watch out the backgrounds and stuff for just stuff that you might it's kind of it's not so serious a movie where you're like paying attention all the time, so it lets you kind of take a look around at different stuff in the background, and so
Yeah.
I did appreciate that. You know what?
I appreciate that it was more so of, instead of cameos, it was more so of a history of animation. And I'm a big fan of like how animation has gone throughout the years. And I loved how they used every single little thing. They used claymation, they used a sock puppet, they used,
Mm-hmm.
the 1940s animation in one little scene. You have your 3D, you have your traditional 2D, you have anime, old filmation animation. It was just done very, very well and honorable.
I agree. But the best thing about this movie has to be the jokes. They come out of nowhere, and especially just keeping in mind that it's a Disney movie. I don't want to spoil like too many of the jokes, but there was at one point where they're like, the officer lady is like, you know, I'm not getting promoted or whatever. They don't trust me because last time I brought him to the wrong
Oh, no,
place
you
and
can
we
talk about that.
busted into
This is spoiler talk. Come on. We're already knee deep in.
yeah, pretty much. And so, she's telling this story about how the Paw Patrol attacked. And I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of lame. Like, what a dumb reference. And she's like, Officer Malone will never have kids. Like, oh, it came out of nowhere. And I thought it would just be some stupid reference, but they just pulled that, like, totally implying that the Paw Patrol castrated a police officer. Like, I can't. That's not what I was expecting out of a Disney movie.
Yeah,
And there's just
didn't
so
didn't they
many
say
moments
like
like
Peppa
that.
Pig or something like that like attacked him too?
Peppa Pig is something. Yeah, Peppa Pig was somewhere in there. They just briefly mentioned it, but
Yeah.
what I thought was originally just gonna be this some stupid reference, just because it's like, oh, they're dogs. How could they attack? But they just totally ramped it up, and it was the funniest thing.
It was funny. It was funny. I
Ugly
liked
Sonic, it never gets old. Even though I said it did, it didn't. You
it
know.
doesn't. Anytime he showed up, like I thought he was just gonna be that beginning scene. Then he
Oh
shows up
yeah.
again. And then he's like the main helper at the end of the movie. I'm like, masterpiece.
The whole they do rely somewhat on like old references, to the old Chip and Dale show. They have like Pogs and whatnot, all this old '80s stuff that
Bunch
I
of
can't
NES
relate to. But
stuff.
it just I think it's enjoyable for everybody because my grandma is gonna like, oh, that's a fun little cabin, but she's not necessarily gonna get Ugly Sonic. So it kind of has something for everybody.
Hmm.
They go through different levels of internet or old timey joke. It all makes fun of itself, so everybody's gonna find a different part of it especially funny.
Yeah.
And I like that it's only an hour and a half. It did not overstay its welcome. It kept moving pretty fast, and it just totally doesn't go where you think it does. It's at every given point, whether he's just walking home and he has his stupid AirPods in,
They're just like
and
massive.
he he takes them. They're just humongous AirPods in this chipmunk's ear. This whole time he's like, "Hello, Mrs. House. Hello, everybody." And
Yeah.
they play it up a million times like this has happened before, but he goes just walks inside totally normally, takes it out like death metal, just puts them aside, doesn't even acknowledge it. And then you have Alvin and the Chipmunks rapping, and it just totally goes from one joke to the other.
Oh, I forgot about that part with the Alvin and the Chipmunks joke. That one was a good one too. Um,
They somehow made
E.T. versus
rapping
Batman,
E.T. versus Batman. He starts crying.
and it's like a flash animation.
Yeah, I've never seen a movie with rapping, animals, even if it's making fun of itself. I've never seen it not be more more funny than it is cringe. Like 95% of the time it's just pure cringe. Maybe there's a little irony to it. It doesn't happen all that often, but the fact that it made an enjoyable sequence, not by like trying to do anything, but he just keeps rhyming the same thing about whales over and over again. He's like, I don't eat whales, just the whole time. That's the whole song.
Yeah.
I was like,
The
I couldn't have thought of a better way to do that.
Yeah, it definitely was good. I heavily enjoyed this because I've never really watched the original show. Like I've watched like a few episodes here and there, but this show just kind of catches you up like okay, it was a show that kind of existed and then it got canceled. And then it kind of explains it in like a meta way, and I really enjoyed
Yeah,
that. It's not like there's a
they
ton
don't.
of references that they just throw at you that you need to understand, like you needed to watch the original show to understand.
No, no, yeah, they give you the Cliff Notes version. They tell you everything you have to know, but they don't rely on it hardly at all.
Hmm.
They just kind of make fun of itself and then move on. It's not really about the old show. They just give you the like rundown of what happened, and then there you go. It lasts like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think that if Disney's, it's gonna be hard because you can't make too many of these kinds of movies, or else it just gets whatever. But if Disney once in a while could make something a little bit more funny, but it doesn't have to be heartfelt or anything, just it's gonna be hard to top this though,
I don't agree
without it
with you
feeling like
about
just
it
riding
being
the success.
I don't agree with you being super funny. Like I wasn't like busting out like there are a few times, yeah, like when you had Ugly Sonic and you had like a few references, I was like, "Ooh." But I didn't think it was that great. I think a lot of their cartoons are a lot more funnier. Like you have Big Hero 6 for instance, that's pretty funny.
I think it was funnier than most people. I think I found it insanely funny at most points.
Mm.
I Maybe it's just me, but I thoroughly enjoyed this film. I I'm shocked you didn't find it, funnier,
No,
because
I
I don't
just
really laugh out loud at movies all that often. Maybe like once a movie if it's really trying, but this one had me laughing out loud probably 5, 10 times.
hmm. Yeah, I liked a lot of the different ideas that they had, and they were funny, but I wasn't just like busting out laughing. Like I like the idea that like all the mice are like technically drug addicts, but it's like stinky cheese.
Stinky
Like that's
cheese.
funny, but it's not like I was busting out laughing at it. I was more laughing at like the different animation styles that they were making fun of. Like the chef for the stinky cheese is literally like a Muppet, and so he's all like getting serious and stuff. Like I liked some of that.
Well, those parts weren't as funny, but like
I thought
the
those were
parts
more
you
funnier.
remember being, I liked the one-off like gotcha gags,
Mm,
like E.T. and Batman, like you know,
yeah.
like the Paw Patrol reference, like the Sonic one. Those were like the highlights of the movie, but it was never boring to watch.
Oh yeah, I don't. I agree with like you. Like it wasn't boring at all. I just there's some things I didn't consider as funny, and overall, I didn't think the movie was as funny as you thought. But there's still like moments I was laughing.
Okay, well that one is you're gonna have to decide for yourselves then. I thought it would be But yeah. Overall, I'm glad Disney's kind of broadening their horizons. I was not expecting them to make a strictly comedy show spoofing their other properties. Uh, but I'm glad with the introduction of Disney Plus, they're making way more stuff and way different stuff than you'd expect Disney to make.
Yeah.
So I think this is a step in the right direction regardless.
I love the idea that they make fun of bootlegs because Disney bootlegs are notorious. Like everything of
They
Disney
are
bootlegs.
bad. They are so funny.
I love the part when Flounder gets kidnapped and like a bunch of his eyeballs get taken out and like he all gets disassembled, and he's slapped on the label of the fish princess or something like that. It was funny.
Yeah. They did a great job with the nice thing is for a comedy movie, the plot's actually pretty solid. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
take itself as serious as any other Disney movie, but you know, it's an interesting idea. It's not like it was an afterthought. They kind of put a little more effort into the plot than you'd expect out of some just generic spoof comedy movie, and I think it really shows, you know. Just that, you know, it totally did its job, and it made it so that it wasn't so reliant on those just one-off gags, one-off, oh, look at it's that guy from South Park. You know, they don't have to rely so much on that.
Yeah.
So, overall, I think it was a great movie. Um Highly recommend watching it. It's one of the better things Disney Plus has come out with, but they've kind of been on a roll lately.
Yeah, they really have.
Alrighty then. Well, that's been our review of the Chip 'n Dale movie. I'll give it 7 out of 8. Alrighty. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want more of these amazing podcast videos. And thanks again for watching.